Hello, Savannah. Thank you for tuning into WRULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul. And my name is Julia Spencer. Thank you so much for tuning in. I wanted to talk to you a little bit today on this show, Real Estate Real Talk, about tax sale foreclosure issues. And just a little bit of a background of the show. Real Estate Real Talk, we talk about anything and everything related to real estate investing on this show. I'm a local real estate investor here in Savannah, Georgia. Also invest in Florida, South Carolina, have dabbled in Alabama as well as a couple of the western states like Nevada, Arizona. And I kind of bring my expertise and my knowledge and anything else that I run into on a day-to-day basis to you on this show. And long time no here, we haven't had any guests on this show. And incidentally, this week, I was finally able to interview my tax sale foreclosure attorney that I've been working with since 2019. And I have a little interview that I brought here with me regarding this. This interview was done this past Monday, actually, just 2 days ago, and it was a rather lengthy interview. So it's going to be split up in a couple of different shows. But on today's show, we want to focus a little bit about his background and kind of like the expertise that he has, and possibly even maybe the expertise that you should be looking for if you're looking for an attorney that can help you with real estate and tax sale foreclosures or title searches or anything else like that. And so I wanted to let him actually tell his own story. And then in the second segment of the show, we're going to talk a little bit about the process, basically how properties move through a tax sale. And you get to hear it for once, not from my own speech, but from the actual professional that I work with. And the professionals that I work with are excellent people. I love working with them, and he is one of them. So let's just get right to the interview. The way the show is usually structured is we talk for the first 20 minutes or so. Then we have a little bit of a break with some announcements and maybe even some music. And then we continue with the second segment all the way until 1 o'clock. And I wanted to let you know that the viewpoints expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of WRU, its license holder, or its staff. My tax attorney, his name is David Basil. He is located in Carrollton, Georgia, so he does tax sale foreclosure properties all over Georgia. Here is the interview. Into you. I mean, how do you mentioned that you were supposed to be a chemical engineer. Instead, you are helping me with my tax sale property. So how did that go about?
Right. So I started back, I went to Clemson University way back when they first won the national championship. How about that?
Wow.
And then I got out and I got a job in the chemical industry, working in the chemical plant as supervisor / engineer. I saw the president, consultant, all the kind of the tiers of the company there. Just decided it wasn't what I really wanted to do the rest of my life. So they had me on the second shift. So I started going back to school, and I took a few math classes, but didn't want to do that. So I started in the English. My father is actually a retired history professor, so I had the liberal arts in the family, but I never really did that. So I got an English degree, and I had switched jobs as to an environmental regulator, and was dealing with lawyers at the time. And I just thought, well, I could do this better than they can. So I applied to law school in South Carolina, was accepted in 1991, I believe. And then I completed that degree in 94. Had a little small job in South Carolina, but I moved over here I had taken the Georgia and South Carolina bar actually on one during the same week. It's kind of funny stories because when I finished that, I went to, when I finished both of that, I was going to go and celebrate. And I went to the bank on a Friday afternoon, try to write a check, and realized my hand was somewhat crippled from writing for 4 days.
Wow.
Intensely. I never really knew. This was the adrenaline. But so I went to Georgia, and I got a job with the Superior Court as the law clerk. And what that is like the chief helper to the judge, reviews motions, writes a lot of, reviews all the briefs and the arguments, the written arguments that the lawyers have that the judge wants you to deal with. It's usually the more lengthier ones they assign you. I did that for 2 years, and then I got an opportunity. It was highly unusual that at the age of 33, I was asked and then appointed as a county attorney in Carroll County. Mm-hmm. I'm probably the youngest county attorney ever in Georgia, if not, one of those. I mean, that's a job that usually someone as old and gray fills. But so I stayed there for 11 years. I was a chief government counsel, and I learned all about land use, taxation, employment, civil rights, just an incredible amount of legal work that I was exposed to. In 2008, I had been there 11 years. I left and established my own firm. And I just, rather than pursuing a expertise, because during that time I had actually become an expert in municipal law. I took exams and was peer reviewed by an organization out of Washington as the International Municipal Lawyers, and I was the 58th nationally to become a local government fellow. So, but rather than pursuing that, which would have taken me away from my family in Carrollton, probably, I would have gone to the West Coast or mainly to Atlanta or anything like that. I just decided to set up a local shop. It was a difficult decision, but that's what I did. So I did like every other lawyer does when they start out, is they do whatever comes in. Yeah. And after a while, I had started to do some redemptions on some tax deeds, and I was familiar with the tax sale process. While I was, I represented the tax commissioner for 11 years, and I sold over 350 properties at the courthouse steps. I was the auctioneer, and we'd go through and oversee the excess funds and things of that nature. But I never really dealt with the issues following the tax sale, and I got that opportunity to start doing that. It was just a few here and there. And meanwhile, I started, my practice grew a little bit. But as I became, I've been a lawyer in November, it'll be 30 years and practicing. Oh, wow. But when it was 25 years of practice, I really realized what I like to do. And that was these issues in taxation and curative title matters, unwinding little hairballs that were difficult to solve. And part of that, I guess, is my engineering background, is I like problem sets. Right. And then the law with the real estate, which is, kind of very steep in historical issues, really going back to not necessarily the Magna Carta, but a lot of it, if you eventually follow it back, a lot of these ancient courts established in really some of the real estate principles that we deal with today, rather than what we call the common law. They were then, when it came over, they were codified. We know them now as statutes. But a lot of them, the reasoning for those came out of those courts, and so that's intriguing. And then the tax law, which is, I think it's kind of funny, is that when I was in law school, the two courses that I really did not prefer, I did well in them, I didn't prefer, was one, property law because of zoning, and taxation. Well, it turns out when I was, as a county attorney, became an expert in zoning and land use. And then I became very involved in taxation. In fact, I had a couple of cases at the Supreme Court in sales tax back in the early 2000s, and it was that sort of things. But so I found that, jump forward to 25 years, I found that those these issues were really the ones I liked. I could litigate a case, but I really prefer the problem solving. And it's almost, when you do it right, it becomes almost transactional nature. You know all the things, and meaning that there's less drama,
right? Yeah.
In it, and even though it's complicated, and you have to educate judges. You have to sometimes educate these special masters, and
I found that
and especially educate clients.
Right.
So that's kind of how I got into it, and now about I would say 85% of my practice is in this area. I also represent the DOT, so I'm a assistant attorney general. Love that work because it's just as complicated to do.
And DOT
lawyers.
DOT, for those that don't know what it is Department of Transportation.
That's correct.
Okay.
Always they say no one likes the DOT lawyers, but they respect them.
Okay.
So it's like one of those things is, why is that? Because they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so I always like to be in the crowd where there's that going on, because that means that there is lots of people with good skill sets that pass those on. And you get some sort of a professional satisfaction out of solving problems, and usually with these tax sales and this is that it's great to do because you help people make money,
right?
And you make a price. Now the tax cycles, the sales go in cycles, meaning that they're sold at auction. Sometimes when the economy is bad, they're sold for not much, and when the economy is really good and the real estate area is good, they sometimes approach market value, if not sometimes over market value, in some areas where someone believes that the purchaser believes that, hey, there's a lot more upside to this. So helping people make money and be successful is also something that it really kind of drives me and helps me. And so at times, for example, before we get into the cost of the matter, these tax sales usually are under the umbrella of being distressed. These are distressed properties.
Right.
It's not beachfront property that what we're dealing with.
Right.
And they're distressed. And so if someone comes in and can again buy it, they see that they can improve it physically, and I can improve the title to make it marketable. What happens is that they're a repeat client. for
Right.
us.
Right.
And we have a lot of repeat business because that's what we try to do. And also one of my points of doing that is that I've discussed the cost really at the first opportunity with the client, because some of these distressed properties, I mean, the tax commissioner will sell anything.
That's for sure.
They'll sell a ditch.
Right.
They will sell the land that's got an easement under a power line where you can't do anything with it.
Right.
It goes on. I've seen people go crazy over trying to buy a detention pond.
Right. Right.
That they can't do anything with, because and sometimes I've had clients buy open space that is easement restricted by an HOA that may be defunct, but you can't do anything with it because it's got zoning and covenants restricting that. So so the tax commissioner will sell anything. So basically what I do is I'm very upfront about our fees, and I just say to the client, prospective client, is it worth putting all these legal costs into it, because we want you to make a profit.
Right.
A very, very small amount of the people do it by principle. Oh, there's a something that's right beside me. I don't want to have any problems with my grandkids on it. And we say, okay, well, fine, we'll be glad to do it for you. But all the other people are, we want to say, look, you're not going to get your money back, or you're going to have limited use out of it, and it's not worth it to do one or both of the processes.
Right.
So we do talk people out of, or try to talk people out of using some of the services that we offer, because it won't benefit them.
Right, yeah.
And we do that. I do that because we want them to be successful. And that's one of the things I think has made us partially successful, is by helping all these other people and trying to be honest with them up front. And we'll have people that we say that and they never hear from them again. And that's fine. Some of these people will go out and buy loads of property in rural areas. Oh, I only paid $200 for that. And getting into some of our costs, we usually tell everyone to budget about, right now, $1,300 for what we call the barman first process.
Right.
And they say, well, I only paid $200 for it. And I say, well, you have to decide if that's worth it or not, because it doesn't matter to us or our process if that property is worth $10 or $200,000. Typically, the amount to work on all these titles is going to be about the same. So, in fact, it's kind of strange that $200,000 properties are actually cheaper for when we do a quiet title than the other ones.
Right, yeah.
And the reason for that is because they just get either unused or discarded by the former property owners for years and years and years, until the tax commissioner or the city decides to do something about it. And at that time, when they do, and you look at the title and it's got 4 or 5 people that are deceased in the chain of title, and the heirs are entitled to notice, and it's costly, but the property's not worth that much because it was discarded to start with.
Right.
So there's always that going on.
The trade-off, yeah.
I've talked a lot of it.
And that's kind of like the reason I got into it too, is to help people make money. This radio show, obviously, as well as helping people, consulting them, answering questions. I find like what you said really rang true, that if you go into it for a little while, for a couple years like I have, and you have done this many more years than I have, is that you end up educating people that should know more than you. I.e., I usually explain it to real estate agents whenever I try to sell one of these properties. And a lot of times they don't know anything about tax sale properties. They don't know how to sell them. They don't know how to market them. They don't understand the different versions of title that you can sell. I mean, I've had real estate agents tell me, oh, it's a tax sale property. You can't sell it. It's not a good title. And I'm like, no, I can, and I have. There's just different ways to convey.
They are sometimes the worst clients because they have enough education to know how to sell and move, but their expectation was either they don't know or you tell them or they forget, and their expectation is much higher. Or someone who's unfamiliar with it that will come in and actually listen to you.
Right.
Oh, I've had, but I mean, everybody's a good client, and that's not, I guess it's not good to generalize.
You're listening to an interview that I conducted with Mr. David Basil. He is my tax attorney, or I should rather say my real estate attorney that deals with my tax sale properties. And you just tuned into Real Estate Real Talk with Julia M. Spencer here on WRULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul. And this interview I conducted, as I mentioned last Monday. He talks a little bit about his background. But in the second part of this interview, which we'll play right after this little break with announcements, he's going to talk a little bit more about the process of tax sale foreclosures and some of the things that you need to watch out for. He's going to talk a little bit about title searches, how properties are moved through the sale, through the tax sale foreclosure, and county versus city taxes. Of course, the tax process itself, as well as other liens. So you should really stay on right now and continue listening if you're in a real estate area and are interested in this, if you're a real estate agent or any kind of real estate investor. We're going to get to the rest of the show right after the break. But first, we're going to play a few of the announcements here. So please stay on. Don't go anywhere.
This is WRUU, your radio station. Each of our hosts is just like you. We're your friends, your neighbors, and your co-workers. We're Windsor Forest Radio, and Ardsley Park Radio, and Liberty City Radio, and radio for and from every other part of Savannah, too. Like you, we can't keep going without covering expenses. So please help us by donating whatever you can. Go to WRUU.org and support your local radio station. Any amount is welcomed. Thank you for your support of WRUU.
Tune in to Way Left of the Dial every Monday afternoon here on WRUU from 4 to 6 p.m. for Music with an Edge with Tom. It's Way Left of the Dial every Monday afternoon from 4 to 6 p.m. here on WRUULP 107.5 FM.
WRUU 107.5 is a proud community radio station bringing Savannah the best talk shows, music, and entertainment with Global Soul. We here at the station want to thank you, Savannah, for listening, donating, and inviting us to be a part of the community. Because of you, we've been able to engage with the community at events like Juneteenth and Earth Day. We're always appreciative of opportunities like those, and we look forward to seeing more of you, Savannah, in the future.
You're listening to Real Estate Real Talk with Julia M. Spencer here on WRULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. On today's show, Real Estate Real Talk, you're listening to it with myself, Julia M. Spencer. We're talking to my prized attorney that I've been working with for the last 5 years with my tax sale foreclosures and various other real estate issues that I've had over the years. He's done a lot of the barments on my properties that I've bought. He's done a bunch of quiet titles on some of the properties I bought here in Savannah, Georgia. He is located in Carrollton, Georgia, so you can really do any kind of tax sale foreclosures in the state of Georgia. So he's going to talk a little bit more about the process here in the remaining part of this interview. So here it is, without further ado, David Basil, who's talking about the tax sale foreclosure process.
So what happens is that, and then there is, first of all, there is a totally separate process about how these properties are moved to sale.
Mm-hmm.
And they are based on the unpaid ad valorem taxes, which are property taxes,
Right.
and could be, and if the tax commissioner is selling them, now if you're in the city, like the city of Savannah,
Mm-hmm.
it's a little different situation, where the tax commissioner sells properties based on their county and state ad valorem, and the city will sell that same property based on city ad valorem.
Right.
So, but you're not allowed to sell the same property within a year according to the law. But actually, I'm going to walk that back. You can find yourself, and I have found issues where properties are sold twice.
Mm-hmm.
Really in the metro area, I think it was either Union City or City of East Point sold something, and the Fulton County Tax Commissioner sold the same property. And it really got bizarre because Fulton County was late to record, first to sell, but late to record.
Mm-hmm.
So the person who bought it in East Point was unfamiliar that someone had a prior tax interest that could redeem it,
Mm-hmm.
and didn't discover that until their barment was over.
Wow.
Just, that was one for the record books. But there is a certain process
Mm-hmm.
that the tax commissioners have to follow. Now, I haven't really delved into that in a long time. Just speaking briefly about it, they're required to send notices more than once to the property owner, and to the interest holder you get probably one notice, and then it's advertised. And then what they do is they will not only do that based on what we call a writ of FIFA, which is taxes due and owing become actually a judgment
Mm-hmm.
that is put on the lien books. But then they go out and further do a process that's called levy. And then they go out and they send a notice to the property owner, just a letter, but they go out and tack the property and say this property is going to be sold.
Right.
So there's two distinct processes called this. One, the due and owing, and then the levy. And once that happens, then they could go to sale as long as it's on the first Tuesday of the month, and they've advertised 4 consecutive weeks prior to that first Tuesday,
Mm-hmm.
and they sell it. So once someone at the auction is the highest bidder, they are entitled on that day, or as soon as the deed is signed, which should be really on that day,
Mm-hmm.
to automatically 20% interest.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's not a pro rata. It's not. It's 20% interest.
Right.
So one of the strategies someone should have if they know that a property was sold and shouldn't have been sold. For example, the mortgage company, is obviously it's a brick home. It's nicely done. It's not distressed at all. What's going to happen is the tax deed buyer, the intelligent one, or the experienced one, I should say, is going to bid that up as high as they can.
Right. Exactly.
$100,000, $110,000, $120,000, because they know that mortgage company has made a mistake, and they're going to have to be paid. So they may be paid in 3 or 4 weeks. It may take them half a year, but they're going to make 20% on that money.
Right. Exactly.
Immediately.
That's a great rate of return.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's kind of like a commercial instrument. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, well, what do you get when you buy that tax deed? And we call them deeds, but you can sell liens. The Fulton County sells liens. Far more complicated
Mm-hmm.
to do that. But most of the tax commissioner cities will sell deeds. And they do that for political reasons. I'm not going to go into that unless you want to know.
Mm-hmm.
But they sell the deeds, and you are really buying almost a right of redemption. It's just, you're not buying possession. That what the law says is that, first of all, it says it's a defeasible interest, which basically means that it's split off. Your property is owned as a bundle of rights. You can lease. You got mental rights. You got rental rights. You got air rights. You have right to rezone if they'll do it. You got all kinds of
Right, but in the state
right
of
redemption is a right.
in the state of Georgia, though, I thought that we are buying liens subject to redemption. So I always tell my students that it's not a deed, but you, from the point of the purchase, are responsible for future taxes, because the tax bill will come to you from that point on, although you do not have possession. So it's kind of like different for every state, isn't it?
Yeah, it's different from every state, and you are correct. You're obliged under the law to pay taxes from the tax date forward, which is a little bit difficult sometimes to do because you usually, as a practical matter, have to pay the entire year.
Right.
But forgetting that, you're also obliged to pay any special assessments,
Right. Yeah.
or HOA or condo fees.
Right.
Really, you've got, when your tax deed buyer goes in and there is a subdivision that's got an HOA or a condo association, they need to proceed cautiously, because if you're in the metro area, I know that some of those condo associations charge more than $200 a month.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an outfit in Carroll County here, that a big subdivision, it's got thousands of homes, that charge $2,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are and you're on the hook for that, or the tax deed buyer is, whether it's in person or it's they buy as an entity, you're on the hook for that.
Right.
But what you can do in the barment process that will lead to is to wipe out or bar any interest that existed prior to the tax sale. Mm-hmm. Now, the federal issues are a little bit different. Mm-hmm. You can discharge a federal tax lien and discharge some other federal issues if the tax commissioner has given them sufficient amount of notice prior to the sale. The tax commissioner has to give the either the IRS or whoever else has the interest more than 25 days prior to the sale with a certain amount of things. You got to list the note of the federal tax lien. They've got to put a few other things in the notice to them, and they send it off, and that will effectively, if you get a lawyer involved in it, they'll have to sue under a quiet title. But I have not, but knock on wood, haven't ever lost a case on that discharge. I actually had to file summary judgment against the U.S. Attorney in the Middle District of Georgia, and they finally consented to it, but haven't had any problem with this. Now, if it's there's one thing, if it's under a criminal forfeiture issue, you got a problem. I got one of those now, but that's the only thing that doesn't apply. It's like we had somebody who was into the healthcare fraud. Oh, and the feds went after them for jillions of dollars and having to put a Liz Pendens on it based on a criminal forfeiture. We're still working through that. But that's the only thing that wouldn't apply. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But usually, but you have all these opportunities really to clean the title.
Right.
So what you do is you have to wait the 12 months. Now, those who have an interest in the title may at any time during that 12 months approach you. It's best if when they do is that you give them a payoff, or if you don't, what they can do is tender a payoff, and that's an important word, because tendering means that they have to have a legal funds is the word. And that's not a personal check. they rule the personal check is not legal funds. So you get a bank check, you get a money order. It's best not to do it with cash if you've got somebody who is not cooperating. But you have to send it to them and actually deliver it to them.
Mm-hmm.
And if they accept it, then that, by operation of law, that unwinds the tax sale. Now, what they're supposed to do is issue a quitclaim deed reflecting that within 10 days.
Right. Uh-huh.
But if they don't do it, then again they need to hire a lawyer, and the lawyer will then file into Superior Court either whatever's appropriate, a quiet title, some equitable action to have the court recognize that the redemption was tendered, but at that time they have to actually put the money in that is rejected, if it's rejected, into the registry of the court.
Okay.
So there's a few moving parts there that someone who wants the property back
Mm-hmm.
can have.
Okay.
But meanwhile, if no one does anything, now you don't have an obligation
Mm-hmm.
to notify anyone during that
Right.
12 months. Sometimes what my clients do is they will immediately notify them of their purchase because they want that 20%.
Right.
They say, well, we're not going to hide this ball. We're going to say exactly we're going to do this. But if you don't want to do that, you don't have to.
Right.
And even if they did that and they didn't act. So then it comes time to, when is the foreclosure of the right of redemption available to the tax deed holder? It is available 12 months and a day following the tax sale.
So, mm-hmm.
So we always recommend that they wait for that period of time, because what happens, not only are they allowed to pursue the foreclosure, but an additional 10% accrues. So they all of a sudden they got 30% on their money
Mm-hmm.
there. So if during the foreclosure process someone does redeem it, you're not dealing with the 20%, you're dealing with the 30%. What some people will do is say, well, I went and they said down at the tax commissioner's office to publish it and send it to the person who used to have it, and I did that.
Mm-hmm.
But that does not meet the legal standard. And the legal standard is to use reasonable diligence to ascertain the names and the addresses of those who had an interest at the time of the tax sale. You have to use the available channels of information, and then you have to deliver those notices. There's a lot of little things here that I've talked about that you hit on.
Oh,
So how do you do that?
right. How do you do that? That's the question.
Well, you have to, if you're going to use reasonable diligence to find the names and addresses, but let's advance to those who had an interest at the time of the tax sale.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do a title search.
Mm-hmm.
And you just can't, that is a very difficult, if not probably a more of a professional, almost a quasi,
Mm-hmm.
if not
Right.
legal process.
Yeah. There's
You have a lot of people who are title searchers that are not lawyers,
Mm-hmm.
but they know what they're doing, and the lawyers review it. Because the
Yeah.
lawyers are supposed to be title searchers.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have time for it, but they send it out and they look through it. Okay, what's
Mm-hmm.
this? And they review the instruments of transfer. And what is a title exam?
Mm-hmm.
A title exam is a historical evaluation of the transactions in the property from buyer to seller, and also lien holders. If you had a security deed,
Mm-hmm.
or you have a judgment against the property, or there's some tax problems. So you have to look at this. And the problems you come up with the title, there may be what we call, there's a break in the chain.
Mm-hmm.
That there is at some point in time, the buyer of this property was not the seller who sold it. You can't find out where they bought it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we call the break in the chain. There could be problems, and often problems, in the legal description.
Mm-hmm.
of it. There could be problems when they pass away. And, how do you get property from the deceased into, either new owners or the heirs?
Mm-hmm.
So those are governed typically either by what we call the title standards that the Georgia Bar has put together that recognizes what the professional will do when reviewing and passing on marketable title. So you've got those kind of moving. And then also you've got when we say the background real estate law codified as to how to properly pass that in situations. You got all kinds of things that happen.
And how far back do you have to do this title search in order for it to be sufficient?
Well, that's a good question, because normally we may only go 40 years
mm-hmm.
on the barment, which is the foreclosure.
Mm-hmm.
And why do we do that? Because we find within that 40 years, and let me digress just a minute. If you do a quiet title, you're usually generally going back and usually selling property in Georgia. The standard is 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people will go back 60 years to do that. But what we want to identify in the historical record is when the problems began
mm-hmm.
and where the tax problems began. And then a lot of times, because we have the problems happened in the last 15, 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we can easily identify those. And then beyond that, we find a record where they were bought and sold, and we feel comfortable that is what we call the floor, the vesting title, good vesting deed or vesting deeds in the property, and we feel the level of confidence in that, so we can trust the record that sort of thing. If we solve the later problems that happened 10, 15 years ago, that property we could then move to quiet title and get it marketable based on just what happened 15 years ago. Now, sometimes we can't do that because sometimes there hardly are any records at all. And then what we have to do then is we may have to go back 100 years. If there's a commercial property, and there's some commercial properties or industrial properties in Savannah
mm-hmm.
that we've had to do, and the title examination is very expensive because there are so many different issues that the examiner finds.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these things we'll do in-house. Sometimes if we find that we can't resolve them, we'll go outside
mm-hmm.
and ask someone for assistance from that local area. But if you can't find these vesting deeds, you've got a slight problem there. But that's usually, but you go back. So the title examination does vary
mm-hmm.
on this, but we usually do what was called a limited title, where we can find a lot of the problems and we feel confident we can move forward on that. If we go to a quiet title, we may have to explore in that same property a little bit longer of a record, just to show either the special master or the court that here, this is really the complete title, and we're solving the problems around this specific time period, but here's a complete title.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the title insurance companies want. But again, so you are allowed to, we go back to the barman, or we call it the barman, the foreclosure right of deed. Because
right.
Why do we call it barman?
Right.
And that's kind of short for it. Because really all of these, if you go back to the rights
mm-hmm.
of the property, all these bundles of rights, You have legal rights and equitable rights. Legal rights are typically possession of the property. You legally can possess it, you can farm it, you can do a lot of things that are physically on there. Equitable rights are, you can take a loan out on it and lien it. There's taxation that's due. That's an equitable right. So also the right of redemption is an equitable right. So that's really what you're buying in the tax deed.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do is we bar the equitable right of redemption. So when you foreclose on the right of redemption and you bar the equitable right of redemption, it's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So in short, it's kind of like the military. We try to reduce everything to acronyms. Okay?
Right.
So we call it barment.
Right.
So when you undertake the barment, we've talked about you got to use reasonable diligence, and then you do your title exam. Now, then the other step is, let's say you do your title exam,
mm-hmm.
and you got a list of names or possible names of people that are involved. You have to use reasonable diligence to ascertain the names and the addresses through available channels of information.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do is we drill down on our searches. We've got extensive searches. We have proprietary databases that we pay for, that some are expensive, mm-hmm. on a monthly basis.
Right.
And we run the names and we get the latest addresses, latest bits of information, and that's what we address our direct our notices to.
Right, and
now,
this is very important, actually, because a lot of students have asked me, well, can I just do my own title search? Why don't you teach me how to do that? And I was like, no. And this is where I always advocate to hire professional help, like a lawyer's office, to do this title search, because I believe, and I don't know if you've ever had that happen in your practice, that if you don't do it correctly and you miss somebody, there's a possibility that this might get overturned, your barment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do that several. We encounter that. We do. Mm-hmm.
And that was an interview that you're just listening to between myself, Julia M. Spencer, and my attorney, David Basil, who's located in Carrollton, Georgia, who does a lot of the work on my tax sale foreclosures and my other real estate. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can always contact me at julie12366@gmail.com. You can also contact me through my YouTube channel. Very easy to find me, Julia M. Spencer. You can leave a comment on any of the videos there, and this show will also be uploaded later this week. If you want to contact my attorney directly, or if you have questions for information or anything like that, basillawgroup@gmail.com. And actually later in the interview, he's going to talk a little bit about how to contact him. We have a lot more of this interview left, which is what I'm going to play in the next couple of weeks. We have about 2 or 3 more shows regarding this. So you should definitely tune in next Wednesday, and we will be back then. Hopefully you enjoyed this interview. You're listening to WRULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with Global Soul. Have a great Wednesday, everybody. Bye-bye.
For your free guide to real estate investing, visit juliamspencer.com.